Matt, you've promised us
Oh
quite the
my God,
bio here for
yeah.
this next group. I'm going to
I
turn it over to you and shut up for a while.
yeah. So this is the KLF with their album "Chill Out." In the opening montage, you heard a clip from "Wichita Lineman" was a song I once heard, and now you're going to hear a clip from "3 a.m. Somewhere Out of Beaumont." There
Well, I
you
already
go.
learned something that there's songs on this. I just thought this was one big piece.
Well, we'll
So,
get to that, John. So,
okay.
Chill Out by the KLF comes in at number 369 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums. Actually, oddly enough, just one ahead of Prefab Sprouts' Jordan the Comeback. So, back to back records here. Uh,
Very
Chill
different
Out's
albums.
very different. Chill Out is ranked number 28 in 1990 and number 2004 of all time. It is the KLF's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. It did not make Rolling Stone's list, and KLF is ranked number 1,155 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. Um, so guys, I don't know about you. I had never heard of these guys before. Is that? Can I say the same for you guys too?
Oh,
Correct.
no, I knew the song 3 a.m. Eternal, which was a
Okay.
pretty big hit. That
Yes.
sounds nothing, by the way, like
Nope.
this.
There you
So
go.
I was
Right.
completely caught off guard. Yeah.
So I knew nothing about this band, and when I started reading the bio, I thought I was reading like an Onion article. Like it seemed like a joke, and I had to reread it several times, and I was like, "Oh my God, what am I getting into with this band?" This is one of the most interesting bios I've ever seen in a band. So I'm
Wow.
just gonna. There's a lot of things I can't leave out, so I'm gonna go more than three fun facts, Josh, just
Okay.
for fair warning. But so KLF, it stands for Copyright Liberation Front. Copyright's being spelled with a K.
I was
There are
wondering.
several. There are several other band names that these guys went by. They started off as the Justified Ancients of Mumu, which also was shortened to the Jams, so they're also known by that. Also, they were the Time Lords for a period of time, the K Foundation, the One World Orchestra, and 2K. So any one of those, they've had those names at any given point in time. It's basically two different people. We have not covered the KLF before, or these guys. However, one of the members, Bill Drummond, he actually formed a record company called Zoo Records, and he was also a manager and producer for two previous CTS bands that we have covered. Echo and the Bunnymen and the Teardrop Explodes. So we covered some of those records before, but first time we're covering Bill Drummond. So this group was formed in 1987 in London by Bill Drummond and Jimmy Cauty. So they are the two members of the band, and this is their third studio album. They have a total of four. But they also have several compilation and remix albums because they are mostly known as an electronic band. The genres are electronic, house, ambient, dance, Eurodance, stadium house, of which they are credited as being pioneers in that genre, as well as avant-garde and alternative dance. Some other stadium house artists that you might have heard of before include The Prodigy and Basement Jaxx. There's another one, and the Chemical Brothers are all kind of considered artists in those in that genre.
It's like anyone on a SSX snowboarding game for PlayStation 2.
There you go.
Soundtrack, basically.
Yes. So the KLF have stated that this particular record was recorded in one 44-minute live take. And it took them a couple of days to get everything all together. But yeah, it's all one take.
Oh, wow.
and,
Weird.
and after the recording, the duo thought that the sound of this album was kind of evocative of a trip through the American Deep South.
Okay.
Drummond said, quote, "I'd never been to those places. I don't know what those places are like. But in my head, I can imagine those sounds coming from those places just looking at the map. The titles of the parts are poetic descriptions, often complete sentences, incorporating statements of time, place, and situations along the Gulf Coast journey." So there is a theme to this, albeit one that was determined after the recording of the record. So the couple artists that I found that were influences of them, include Soft Cell, Kraftwerk, Pink Floyd, and Brian Eno.
Okay.
And similar artists, some of these seem stretches, but I've seen the Pet Shop Boys, CNC Music Factory, Jesus Jones, and LFO.
Well, if you listen to like 3 a.m. Eternal, for
Right.
sure, you could see
Right.
that. Yeah.
Yes.
That's why it may seem like a stretch, because this doesn't sound anything like 3 a.m. Eternal.
No, this is probably like more of a
Eno.
Pink Floyd kind of, or Brian Eno, exactly. And bands that artists that have been influenced by them include Boards of Canada, Blue Man Group, and DJ Spooky. Some of the people there. So, all right. So, fun fact. So, they were originally a hip hop outfit. And they did go on to Pioneer Stadium House. So, so they basically, and also what they are known for is the using of the digital sampler. Which this is a big thing for them. They early on were basically just ripping off and plagiarizing other artists and incorporating that into their music. So I was thinking of Girl Talk when they were describing them, right? Because it's very much like that. So they would cut chunks from existing works, paste them into new contexts, and then they would underpin that with rudimentary beatbox rhythms and overlaid with Drummond's rapping, which is really funny because he's Scottish. He's actually born in South Africa, but he's raised in Scotland, so he's got this thick Scottish accent in his raps, which is kind of interesting. And so as the Time Lords, they also came out with a book in 1989 called The Manual, How to Have a Number One the Easy Way. And so it's basically a step-by-step guide to achieving a number one hit single with little money or talent is what it's billed as. And they go through very specific things in terms of like, how long the song should be and like what, how you should create the beat and stuff like that. And there was actually an Austrian band called Edelweiss that followed this strategy basically to the T. And it was for their 1988 single "Bring Me Edelweiss," and that reached number one in 6 different countries and sold over 5 million copies worldwide. So there you go. So you can go get that book and create your own.
Did you listen
single.
to that song?
I did, yes, and it's very much kind of like it's like cutting up other parts of songs and putting like a heavier beat to it. So it's more up front and. Yeah, it's got quite the video too.
So it's like MC Hammer with European
way
sensibility.
Way better. And more songs too. I mean, it's not just one or two songs. It's like they're throwing a lot of different things in together. And I read this several times. I had to do a double take because I was like, that's got to be a joke. But the KLF are known as the biggest hit makers of 1991. The singles that they sold were the best-selling singles of worldwide in the year 1991. So they were definitely more popular in Europe, but some of their hits did make it over to the U.S.
So the Manual is a real thing.
The Manual's a real deal, yeah. Yep. And I should mention, John mentioned this earlier, but their highest charting single is 1991's 3 a.m. Eternal, which hit number 1 in the UK and hit number 5 in the US, excuse me. All right. So they did become very popular, but they were not really in this game to be popular. So when they were invited to perform at the 1992 Brit Awards, they played a version of that song, 3 a.m. Eternal, with a grindcore group called Extreme Noise Terror. And this version of the song is quite different than the one that they had become known for, because this was basically an unlistenable, screaming, like hardcore, aggressive sounding song that left a lot of audience members perplexed. And the performance did end with Drummond firing blanks from a machine gun into the audience.
It sounds like the band Suicide. Remember their performances and how they talked about the whole time it was just to agitate the.
Yes.
So that's what that reminds me
very,
of.
very performance artist nature to this band. And then they left the stage to the announcement that the KLF was officially leaving the music business. They also dumped a sheep carcass in the lobby of the venue for that. And shortly after this, after they quit the music business, they deleted their entire back catalog so no one could buy their music again. So that's one of the reasons why it was hard to find their music, because they were like, we're done. I also like this. They won an award at that ceremony at the Brit Awards, but they took it and they buried it at Stonehenge, outside of Stonehenge. And a year later, somebody else dug it up and brought it back to the band somehow. And the band took it back to Stonehenge and buried it even deeper this time. So it's, as far as I know, it's still out there. And yeah, so I like that one. They released a song in 1987 called Justified and Ancient. And in 1991, they did a remix of it. And this time they got Tammy Wynette to perform on it with them at the suggestion of Jimmy Cauty. But it was only when Wynette actually showed up on set for the video that Cauty realized that he actually never meant to have Tammy Wynette sing. He was actually thinking of Dolly Parton. So when Tammy Wynette gets to the stage, she's like, "Who's that lady?" It's like, that's Tammy. It's like, "Oh, I was thinking of Dolly Parton." So he screwed that up, which made me laugh. And what they are most infamously known for, in August of 1994, the group filmed a piece called K Foundation Burn a Million Quid, in which they both actually burned 1 million pounds in the back of an abandoned boathouse in the Scottish Isle of Jura. And there's a lot of videos on this. They they went on a lot of different talk shows, and people were like incredulous, like really mad at them. One of them being Joe Elliott from Def Leppard's on this British talk show with these guys, and he's like, "What the hell is wrong with you guys?" And oddly enough, like they take the criticism pretty well, and then they talk about like the good that it did, and it's like, it kind of moral questions about like, well, if we spent the money on a bunch of Rolls Royces and stuff like that, nobody would say anything, but because we burned it, like it's our money, we did with it what we wanted to, and everybody's getting mad at that. So it was a lot of interesting discussion with that. But and I guess when they took the money out, the bank made them take out an insurance policy for £7,000 because they'd never had anybody like take out £1 million from the bank at one time. So that was kind of the thing. But these guys are crazy is the short of it. And I guess in 2017, they actually opened up their catalog to some streaming services, so you can still get some of their music, but it has been hard to come by. And it's just, there's
not
all
Spotify.
Kinds of,
it wasn't there.
Well, they have like remixes on Spotify, not the actual album, because a lot of their stuff, that when they became popular, it was when they started kind of doing remixes and stuff, and like just seeing if they could make something really, really popular following like a formula that they had. But there's a ton of stuff on these guys. I was fascinated the whole way through, and this record is kind of very different because it's all ambient stuff. So let's hear from Josh on this first. What do you think about this, Josh?
Oh man, I don't know. It's so perplexing. Ambient music, I don't understand like the point of it, and this, I don't know, how do I begin? This album didn't offend me. It was kind of, I guess it fulfilled its destiny of being ambient music. I paid attention. It does sound like there's a journey. It's like you went to a gas station and just filmed traffic going by and the trains, and there's like a lot of found sounds and music in it. It feels like you are taking a road trip across America or somewhere, and like spinning the radio dial and hearing like all different stuff going on at the same time, and there's a lot going on in this album. I definitely thought of Brian Eno when I was listening to it. There's chanting, there's animal sounds like sheep and a shepherd, and it kind of ebbs and flows between these like just kind of noise and found sounds, and then transitioning into music. There's chanting at one point. It's like you're in front of a box fan singing saying stuff like that kind of noise. And there is different, I guess, as what John alluded to, I guess there's different parts of it that are split up. I listened to it on YouTube. I think we all listened to it on YouTube. Yeah. And you can see the track breakdown on it. So like the part where it's titled Madrugada Eterna, it's kind of really spacey sounding, and almost like you're stopped on the road trip and looking at the night sky or something. Elvis makes an appearance on this album on the radio, and then it kind of transitions on Wichita Lineman. It sounds almost like a more traditional club track or trance track at points. It also reminded me of like the X-Files theme. and Pure Moods or something like that. And that whole vibe of aliens and things. I don't know. I didn't find this offensive. I just kind of like perplexed by the whole like who's like into this, like what context are you listening to this type of music, why do you listen to music if this is what you're interested in, like the whole, like I wish somebody who was into ambient was like on the show.
Well, I can tell you what it was designed for, right? This was kind of coming.
Can I guess?
Of like, yeah, go ahead, John. Yes.
Coming down from a rave.
Exactly. That's exactly
Yes.
what it is.
Okay.
Yes.
That's the first thing I wrote, and then the first 900 comments in YouTube were like, "Oh my god!" In the 90s, every time I went and got off my tits on like, and I'm like, "Yes,
Ecstasy.
that's." So I was correct, even though I've never done ecstasy. Okay, yeah, I'm glad to see that I wasn't alone in picking up on that. So yeah,
Yeah, I didn't even like. I don't know. I wasn't in the headspace for that, and I don't know. I don't ever listen to music. Coming down off of drugs, so I can't really speak to that, but I don't know, it's
you come off your drugs the old-fashioned way.
yeah, just shaking in a bathtub,
withdrawing.
Yes, and I don't know, so I'm not into like the chill out vibe, I guess, when listening to this type of music. No pun intended to the name of the album, but I don't know. I didn't find it. We've listened to other kind of albums on the podcast that are soundscapes and more non-traditional type of music, and I still don't find this like Public Image Limited, which is kind of like very abrasive. It is kind of pleasant on some way, and I guess it is something you could put on in the background and not pay attention to, but like, why are you listening to music if you're not paying attention to it? I guess if you're coming off drugs is the answer, but I don't know. That's more of like a pontification. Anyway, it's fine. I don't really recommend it. It's an interesting experiment, but like, I'm not super into it. And so I'm interested to hear what you guys think though.
Yeah, it was a shocking experience for me because the first time I listened to an album, oftentimes I'll put it on as sort of just a true cold listen, right? I'll be listening, but not with the true intensity. And I got about a minute into this and I realized it wasn't an intro, and I was like, all right, I can't listen to this in this way. First listen's going to have to be on headphones because I hadn't quite identified it as an ambient album yet, but I realized that this was not going to be traditional music in the way that I did. I said, okay, we have some experience with this. We've listened to things like The Residents and Public Image Limited and Faust and some of the Krautwerk stuff, and even in the 60s, right, Trout Mask Replica. I was like, okay, we're gonna be in that lane a little bit more. We're gonna be doing not anti-music, but music concrete and ambient stuff. Got it. And so I listened to it, and the first time I listened to it, three things became clear. The first was like, okay, I'm going to have to listen to this again, but I'm going to have to pull out, like, I'm going to have to stop it and listen to each of the things to try to find the coherence to it. The second thing is I realized, this is definitely designed for something drug related. Like, and then it became clear as it went on. I said, okay, this band's British. Rave culture, I think, was just such a bigger thing in Europe than it was. I mean, there were people doing it, but I just feel like so many people that was a part of their 90s, whereas in the America, and for maybe people that are British or European listening, like rave culture was still very niche, I feel like, in America. You knew people, but they kind of were their own distinct subculture, and I don't know if it was in the mainstream. As much as rave culture was in the mainstream, it always seemed like something almost comically European, kind of like certain types of dance music, right? It was definitively, and if you look at the charts at that time, the biggest deviation between the charts of what was on the European charts was a lot of music that was rave and house that just wasn't really charting in America. And of course here, in America, it was like American R&B, which wasn't really charting at the same, like someone like Mariah Carey was a much bigger star in America than I think in Europe, for example. So and then I was like, wow, this sounds nothing like the KLF stuff that I was thinking it was going to be a dance album, and it was nothing like that. This album over time, though, once I kind of realized what it was, I came to appreciate it because it does evoke a mood, and there's sort of an undergirding. It's not, but it sounds almost like an organ that plays in the background that just creates like an ambient sound, like almost the white noise type sound in the back. And then it's funny because you're getting like In the Ghetto by Elvis Presley. You're getting a part of Eruption by Van Halen comes in. You're getting the Fleetwood Mac song, like the 60s Fleetwood Mac song. That was like, oh, wow, there's Fleetwood Mac. And just stuff is kind of coming in almost as if you're changing the radio station. Yeah. So I get what he's saying, that I didn't get like the American South though at all. Maybe that's I got more like if you were driving in like Montana or Wyoming or something, was more the vibe that I got, like big open spaces that you're driving there. I for whatever reason, that preacher who was talking about, like, he was clearly based in New York of some sort, and he was basically like, all the way from New York down to Atlanta, and like that, it just kept getting stuck in my head. And over time I kind of came to appreciate this. It was a very calming sound, ironically enough. It was sort of like driving, a head clearing drive that you were taking as you're sort of thumbing on it's such a different experience because it doesn't exist as easily anymore, where the only thing you have is like an FM AM radio, and you're trying to get something to come in. And part of the experience is the thrill of getting something that pieces in a little bit, but then it goes out, and then you kind of either can stay with it or revisit it after going. And that was what I got, like the radio dial type feel, which is something that's kind of lost in this era of like listening on the phone and stuff like that, and connecting and stuff like that. And yeah, it did really provide like sort of a calming feel for me. And I'm reading the comments on YouTube, and a lot of people were, besides the fact of like coming down from various drugs, a lot of other people were like, I put this on when I'm like sped up a little bit or to go to sleep and stuff. And it almost has like an ASMR quality to it that kind of won me over a little bit. Like you, Josh, it's always interesting to me that someone becomes like an ambient music enthusiast. I always feel like it's more about seeing what the artist can do as opposed to re-listenability. But clearly this had a lot of re-listenability for a lot of people, and it eventually won me over to the point where I think I would give this a thumbs up, in the fact that for what it was trying to do, it was successful for me. Matt, what'd you think on this one?
Yeah, there is something very calming and pleasant and easy to listen to with this. I have the slide guitar is
the pedal steel, right?
Steel is a really, and it's not just a traditional, it's kind of like, it's a pedal steel with an echoey reverb, vibe to it that they put in. And actually Drummond, I saw in an interview that he basically said he's a big country music fan, and he made the comment that like country music is the only form of music that he ever really like loved or felt like that he totally understood, which I found interesting as well. Like, he's a fascinating guy, but it's such a pleasant sound, and like a couple of things that reminded me of it. Like one of it, like towards the beginning of the record, I found myself thinking like, man, I feel like I'm in line at Space Mountain or something like that. It's like you're kind of walking through the thing, and it's like the space is there, and it's kind of like this ambient sound that's happening. And it also evoked a lot of Pink Floyd for me.
Yes. Well, like, it's interesting, by the way, that you thought of people, like everything about this album struck me as like I was in solitude in this album, like near no other humans. So it's funny that you would pick a place that's filled with people, like Space Mountain.
Well, it's not because of the people, just like when you walk onto that, it's like a very, they set up music, the aura and the energy of the place, which is kind of like this, like you're almost in space, and they actually have like ambient type sounds and music coming through, so it's very similar to that.
I was processing it a different way. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, nothing to do with the people, but it's also like the Pink Floyd in specific, like Echoes, like that part in Echoes. Remember that 20-minute long song from Metal? There's like parts of it with like little pings and like things like that were very reminiscent of that. So it's funny. I'm looking at a review here from somebody that says from there that what Ira Robbins of Trouser Press, I guess that's a thing. Say he said this was an accidental recording of 1970 Pink Floyd session during which all the participants have either left or fallen asleep. which made me laugh because but yeah, it's got that vibe to it as well, and it's calming, man. It's not it's hard to call it music. Like
Right.
I was reminded of The Residents because I remember having that reaction. It's like, well, this isn't music, but this is way more listenable to me than The Residents, right? Because the primary instrumentation that they're using, whether it's that the synths or the pedal steel, is just a really nice sound, and it's an interesting thing that you are able to take something so just singular and do it for like 40 minutes, right? Interspersed with sheep and trains rolling by and buzzing from radios. But basically it's like that sound that permeates the record that's just, I could listen to that again. Like this was a I put this on at work. Like I first get into work on a Monday morning. I'm just like, let me just put this on as I try to like get into the day and stuff, So I definitely see a time and place for this type of thing. I'm certainly not an ambient music enthusiast or anything like that, but I definitely, nor am I have been or ever have been in the rave culture or anything like that. So I can't speak to coming down from a rave, but it's a very pleasant sound, and it's hard for me not to give this a thumbs up. Like I enjoyed it, and just when you couple it all with like the background and the stories of these guys, it's just this is a fascinating find for me, and it's just like I can't believe I've never heard of these guys before, and it's just they're ridiculous, but man, they created something really interesting here. So I have to go thumbs up on this for me.
Someone I saw referred to this as womb music, which made me laugh. 'Cause it's kind of electronic womb music. I was like, ooh, that's a good description for it too. Yep.
Jeez.
So yeah, and it's definitely an interesting one. I think we have 2 thumbs up, and Josh, you'd be a thumbs down on this one.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, fair enough.